好的，欢迎大家来到 Hancock 的系列访谈活动之对话。本次我们邀请到的是格莱美提名音乐制作人、录音师、混音师 Doug Fenske。自05年以来 ，Doug 已经参与制作超过2000张唱片，合作的顶级艺人例如 Frank Ocean、Chris Brown、The Wanted、Quincy Jones、小甜甜布兰妮、Bruno Mars、Snoop Dogg 等等。Hi Doug.
Hi Frank, how you doing, bud?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, guys?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Thank you, and also thank for I'm so happy to have you here, and to so happy you can accepted my invitation for this event. I hear. So let's go for our questions. So the first one is, how did you get into the music app? Have you connected with the music since you were a kid?
Yeah, you mean how did I become interested in music in general?
Yes.
When I was young?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my parents listened to a lot of music, and they were musicians as well, but they weren't necessarily high-level musicians. They were more hobbyists. But they exposed me to music at a very young age, and I was always fascinated with the sound of the saxophone when I was very young. So when we were able to join public school band when I was 10 years old, I knew that I wanted to play the saxophone. And fortunately, my hands were big enough. They put me on the saxophone because little kids whose hands aren't big enough, they'll put them on the clarinet or the flute because they can't
totally
around, right?
I'm the same.
Way, yeah.
Totally same.
So fortunately, I was my hands were big enough, and I started playing the sax at 10 years old. And that's kind of how music began for me. And then all the way up for the next 3, 4, 5 years, it was just absorbing it. And I had some rough patches in my learning, and I hit some very kind of sweet spots in my learning. Times when I was very challenged, and then times when I excelled greatly. Within that first year of learning to play the saxophone, I was 10 years old. Now, I think if you ask any 10-year-old kid to play any instrument, it's going to challenge them, right? It's not, of course, there are virtuosos that just sit down, the child prodigies that just and go, I'm not one of those.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those at all. So within that first year, I was frustrated, kind of towards the end of the first year. And I told my mom, I want to be in band next year. I want to quit. And she said, that's fine, but you can't quit right now. You have to stay till the end of the year. And after the end of the school year, if you don't want to do it again next year, that's fine. I said, okay. But then something happened. A light bulb went on like nothing else has ever went on for me before. I went from struggling with embouchure and breathing technique and sight reading and tone and coordinating my fingers and everything, and all of a sudden it just clicked before the end of this year, and I shot right up, and I never looked back, and it made more sense to me than anything's ever made sense in the world. And from there, I kind of took off with it, and those were kind of my very formative first couple years within music. Of course, there's more to discuss there, more to the story, but I think that answers your question kind of about the basic part, right?
Yeah, no problem. It's great. Okay, let's go for the next one. Did you have any formal music education in the school before?
Well, as I was just telling you, yes.
Right? It's more like to connect to what you did right now.
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. So I moved into by the time I was in junior high, I moved into jazz band, and I started playing combos and what have you. And then I was also in symphonic band, which was the classical side of things. And so I got a good big 8 years of theory, and then I went to college, and I knew that I wanted to be in music, but I also wanted to get a degree as well. So I went to college at Eastern Illinois University. I got a degree in speech communications, but during that entire time, I was in bands. And by bands, I mean just bands with other musicians around, not the actual formal school band. We would play in bars and do little stuff, events, that kind of thing. But I knew that I wanted to go into music professionally. I had figured that out by the time I was about 17, probably, about 17. So I knew that after college, I wanted to go to music school. So I went to recording school in Arizona. And I was able to beef up my technical chops as far as being able to record music. And I had already had my theory and my performance from those prior 12 years or what have you. And then after I went to music school, then I came here to Los Angeles, and I began interning and pursuing my career.
Okay, got it. So what promoted you to make music as your career after you graduated from the college, or or?
Well, I decided very early on, as I just mentioned. You know, I decided. I was about 17 years old, I think. What made me find out that I want to be in music was reading liner notes of CDs. I know CDs aren't a thing anymore, right? Yeah. But you know, in the 90s, it was a big deal, and especially in the late 90s. So in the late 90s, I would be reading my liner notes, and I kept reading about all these people that were credited, and I started seeing similarities between the songs that I liked and the people that were credited as these music professionals. Now, I didn't know much about what these people did. I didn't know what went into each one of these jobs. Produced by, mixed by, engineered by, recorded by, you know, etc., featuring, all that. But I knew that I wanted to be one of those people. And I was already so deep into music that I was like, that's what I want to explore. So again, fortunately, I've been focused for a very long time. You know, I've been focused for 20 years on that in particular. And I've had a 15-year career, you know, because of it. So it was really reading those liner notes and seeing the commonality of the studio professionals that were making songs that I admired and wanting to become one of them.
Okay, so the next one is what is the most memorable moment or experience in your music life, you think?
I think there have been three. Okay. I think the first one we already discussed, when the light switch went on. The second most memorable would have been when I mentioned that when I was in junior high and I started playing in a jazz band. There was an 8th grader, an older guy. He was also a sax player, and his brother had some keyboards and such set up in his basement. You know, I'm from Chicago. In the Midwest, we have basements. We don't out here on the West Coast because of earthquakes. But we're in the basement, and he was like, "Yeah, you can record yourself doing stuff on this." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he showed me, and he like pressed record, and then he like programmed a little kick drum, and then he stopped it, and he pressed record again, and he overdubbed a hi-hat, and I was like, oh my god. So you can do this all, and you can make your whole, by yourself, everything. He's like, yeah. And I was like, it was like an epiphanal moment for me. That was very, very memorable. But as a professional, my most memorable moment would have been when I was sitting on the floor of the Staples Center with my mother behind me when I was nominated for a Grammy, and being able to really show her that all her faith and support in me over the years had paid off. And I was able to have her sitting next to me. Now, we didn't win, and that's okay, but being able to have her there sitting next to me, it really was a very important part, and I felt very accomplished, and I felt a great sense of pride. I've always been someone who takes a lot of pride in their work. Maybe to a fault, right? As to where when work's not going well, nothing's going well. It doesn't matter, you know. I've always been that kind of person, and you know, and that moment was very rewarding for me. It was probably the most memorable. So those three kind of moments, checkpoints, if you will, throughout my musical life have been very impactful.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, by the way, so I also read your biography. So you mentioned you also cooperated with Bruno Mars before, right?
Yeah, so I did do sessions with Bruno Mars before he was Bruno Mars. Myself and a group of producers, I was recording. A group of producers called the Stereotypes were producing. They went on. They still work with Bruno now, and Bruno was writing, and it was before his debut album was released. You know, he was a songwriter before that, and we worked on a project for an artist called Melanie Fiona. Her name's Melanie Fiona on the Bridge album, and we did a couple songs on that.
So let's go for the next one. So could you talk about your work right now in LA?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I ended up recently doing something that I never thought I would do. I've made a career of making songs, records, and albums for other people, or being able to take what I do well and lend it to their vision and take my craft. So I consider myself to be a craftsman, not a virtuoso. You don't have to be a virtuoso or a child prodigy, but you do have to pay attention to your craft. I made a career of doing all of that. And this wasn't necessarily triggered by the pandemic. I think I would have done it anyway, but I ended up putting together an album for myself under my name for the first time in 15 years.
Whoa, yeah.
And that was just released in January. I released that back on January 11th, just not even 2 months ago. So I spent the back half of last year doing a lot of work on that.
Wow. Can you share more, maybe a little bit more details about yourself album for the audience? Could you share it? Or I mean,
yes, absolutely. I'm getting to that. I'll get to that. So I spent a big deal of the last half of last year, second half of last year, working on that. And it's not something I thought I would ever do. But you know, I have two very close friends and collaborators in particular. And I sat down with them. When I started that new body of work, I thought it was going to be a new production catalog. And it just seemed like the right time to make it an album. So I sat down with the two of them. And we together did a lot of work and put it together. So, you know, myself and them, you know, we wrote everything. And they're mostly the feature vocals. My vocals are on there a little bit, but they're far better singers than I. I did all the tracking, all the instrumentation, did all the production, and I did all the mixing. I mixed the record on an SSL 9000J with a full range of analog output gear. And that mixing process finished up in just after Christmas. I would say a few days after Christmas, before New Year's. I finished the mixing process at that stage, and then it was off to mastering, and I got the masters back and uploaded them to the distributor, I think on the 4th of January, and then it was released on the 11th. It's 8 tracks, 7 songs, 8 tracks, because one of the tracks has an acoustic version, a song that I wrote called Lie to Me. And the name of the album is Unread, much like you see on your phone all the time, Unread. And it's been some of the most rewarding work of my career, I think, just because A, it was so unanticipated, you know? And B, it's something that I was able to put out as myself. So it's cool. It's a very important thing, and I'll probably do a bit more of it, you know, here coming up pretty soon. I'll probably do a little bit more and then just see where it takes me musically. I've enjoyed it very much. So that's the big thing that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, sounds amazing. Okay. Let's go for the last part is what would you like to say to some of the young musicians or students, or do you have any suggestion for them?
Advice?
Yeah, advice.
I would say that especially now, more so than the 90s, especially now, there are a lot of distractions. There are a lot of distractions. I think the number one piece of advice that I could offer anyone, whether they want to be a piano player or a sax player or an engineer or a producer or a songwriter or a singer or whatever, it would be to really take a good look at how you spend your time. You know, do your hobbies take up most of your time, or does your passion take up most of your time? Your passion should be what your life is centered in. For example, when I was young, you know, they'll tell you got to practice your instrument 3 hours a day, you know, or 2 hours a day or whatever it is. And frankly, I never subscribed to that, because some days I want to play for 6 hours. And other days, maybe only an hour, or maybe I couldn't play for one day or whatever, right? I just played what I wanted to play. And I think if you work on your craft when you want to work on your craft, and your heart is right, and your attention, and you're focused on your passion, that will lead you to where you want to be, right? Yeah. If you find yourself spending too much time on social, if you find yourself spending too much time socializing, if you find yourself spending too much time playing video games or working on your car or, you know, on Amazon or whatever, right? Take a good hard look at your hobbies versus your passion and how you're allocating your time. And maybe you'll discover a little something about yourself. Maybe you'll discover that either you're not as passionate as you thought, right? Maybe you don't care as much as you thought, because you have to care in order to succeed. Or you do care as much, but you're not properly committing yourself. So I think if you can get that straight in your mind as a young creative, then that's what can really kind of open the doors for you to be able to propel yourself forward.
好的，今天我们对话就到这里。如果大家有任何的问题还想要咨询 Doug 的话，欢迎在评论区中留言，我们将第一时间转达给他。同时，如果你对我们的频道感兴趣的话，也非常欢迎你来点赞、关注和转发哦。好，拜拜，我们下次再见。